And went to UGA for college. Met my wife Karen there on her very first day moving into the dorm.
Get out of here.
Just,
Look at you.
Yeah, and we're actually going to be celebrating 30 years this year.
Wow, man. Congratulations,
so, yeah.
Tom. We'll have to get secrets after this,
Good.
right?
It's good. All good stuff.
Welcome to the AERO Atlanta podcast. My name is Shannon James, the president and CEO, and I'm happy to have a great guest with us today, none other than my great friend, the mayor of Chattahoochee Hills, Mr. Tom Reed. Tom, thanks for joining us.
Shannon, it's good to be here.
Awesome. Well, Tom, nothing better than having you here.
I feel like I need to be putting on my James Earl Jones voice. I can't.
You can get there. Take it there.
No.
Take it there.
Sorry.
Sometimes I have to take it there, Tom.
Sorry.
But no, Tom, listen, I'm so glad you're here. And before we jump into it, Tom, I want to make sure all of our listeners understand that this podcast is brought to you by our great sponsors at Wellstar, who are great board members and supporters of the AERO Atlanta Alliance. So we want to thank you, Wellstar, for continuing to support our initiative and also helping us bring this podcast before you today. And so with that being said, Tom, we can get down to business, right? So, Tom, we talk a good bit, and we're really excited, guys, about Chattahoochee Hills becoming members or investors of the AERO Atlanta Alliance, and they have now been part of the organization for just over a year now.
That's right.
Tom and I were just talking about that, and I'm telling you, Tom and the team have come in with full force. And so with that being said, Tom, let's allow our listeners to learn a little bit about yourself, right? Who you are, where you're from, what school did you go to, your professional background, which I think our listeners are going to really enjoy, and a little bit about your family. So anything you want to share with us.
Sure. I'm an Air Force brat, born in Germany. My dad was a mechanic in the Air Force. My mom was a German girl that he met, on the base at one point. Moved around a lot as a kid, as one does when one has that background. And then
Right.
when my parents got divorced, my mom got remarried to a guy that worked for IBM. So I was an IBM brat then, moving around a lot that way. Ended up in Roswell for high school and Crestwood High School, which no longer exists.
Don't tell on yourself,
in
Tom.
Dunwoody. And then went to UGA for college. Met my wife Karen there on her very first day moving into the dorm.
Get out of here.
Just,
Look at you.
Yeah, and we're actually going to be celebrating 30 years this year.
Wow, man. Congratulations,
so, yeah.
Tom. We'll have to get secrets after this,
Good.
right?
It's good. All good stuff. And we've got three amazing kids that we're very proud of.
Awesome.
That are now really cool adults that are fun to hang out with, which is actually probably the thing I enjoy the most in my life right now.
Nice.
My business background, I've been involved in startups my whole business career. We were talking before about things that people might not know.
Right.
So 3 different startups. I've been on the Inc. 500 and Inc. 5000 list 7 times with 3 different companies.
Oh, nice.
List of fastest growing privately held companies in the country. My goal was always to retire early, and I'm kind of in that mode right now, where I'm focused on the give back, and that's kind of what I look at this role at the city as. It's a place where I can try to do something good for the community that I really enjoy and love. So,
Well, you're doing that for sure.
and I could go on and on. I'm known for that, but I won't. I'll let you ask questions.
No, Tom. well, I think as a former banker, man, and I've always appreciated that about you and your thought process and having that background. Being able to deep dive and understand, what makes the characteristics of a small business, a startup, become successful. I think has really helped in your progression as a mayor to help lead and create, in essence, a startup city, right?
That's right.
From scratch. And you guys have been extremely successful, and I think our listeners are going to enjoy hearing from you today for sure. And you mentioned already about something that we didn't know about you, and which now kind of pushes us into now better understanding your role, right? Perfect transition as mayor.
Sure.
So help our listeners understand some of your roles and responsibilities as the mayor of Chat Hills.
So of course there's a legal role, right? The mayor in Chattahoochee Hills, we're a weak mayor form of government, which means that I don't have a vote unless somebody's missing, and I prize those days when somebody's out and I actually get to say yay or nay.
That's right.
Because it's only happened a couple of times. But I basically am the person who sets the agenda and kind of organizes the meetings, the facilitator in chief for the city. We have a city manager who runs the day-to-day operations, so we don't get all that involved in the day-to-day other than from a policy perspective. But I look at my role really as being both kind of the again, that chief facilitator for the city and the person who is out there working for the city to carry the vision of the city forward and to carry it outside of the city. Because the reality is, when you're a huge city and area, but tiny in population, and as we are kind of inside of the development boundaries of Atlanta, there's development past and around us in all directions. We are a place where development is going to happen. And shaping that thoughtfully is something, it's the reason that we became a city. And so I spend most of my time and energy on that, on the how to make the city become the thing that we hoped it was going to be when we incorporated.
Well, I think you've done a really good job of that, Tom. And, you're one of the most humble mayors I've met. And, even when we're out to eat, you're always introducing yourself as Tom Reed, never as the mayor. And I think that speaks volumes to your humility and your character as a person. I've always admired that. And, I love to try and transition a bit into some of the objectives. You mentioned setting the agenda, facilitating. Help our listeners understand maybe the makeup of your council and maybe some of the objectives you guys have for, the short term, 2019 or even 2020.
Sure. Well, so short term, it's a startup city. We're now 11 years in. It wasn't the easiest start, but we've gotten to a situation now where the gears of the machine are running pretty well. Again, tiny city with a tiny budget. Our council and mayor don't take their small salaries. We donate them back to help make the city run. And the reality is, we are. As of this year, as of the creation of the city of South Fulton, we are now the 6th largest city in the state of Georgia.
Wow.
In area, right? But we have a tiny population and no real commercial centers. So the amount of tax revenue that we get is not huge. It's why things that are regionally driven like the T-Splost are so important and why I was so out in the front of that conversation a lot of times. Because, those things are really important to a small town like ours. And we became a city very intentionally because the kind of development, the kind of sprawling development that's happened throughout the rest of the Atlanta metro is not what people in Chattahoochee Hills want. And, there's a lot that goes with that. You think about other places in Atlanta. And, I have this experience having basically been in high school, been brought up in the Roswell area. In Roswell 30 plus years ago, the countryside between Roswell and Alpharetta still had farms in it. It was still area that looks a lot like what Chattahoochee Hills looks like now. And, it's amazing to go up there now and drive to Avalon or something like that and think about the fact that literally 20 years ago, that was still farm fields. And the other thing that's amazing to realize is that none of the people that lived there at that time still do. Almost none, right? They've almost all been pushed out. And I used to use the back roads through Johns Creek to get to UGA when I was going to school there. And very rural area, the little houses in the front of the farm and the little old rural churches and all of that.
Right.
And, over the course of time, what happens in all of those communities is those people get pushed out as the development comes.
Right.
And so there's a real intentionality in Chattahoochee Hills, in our comp plan and in our zoning, about preventing that from happening. About, the development that's going to happen, you can't prevent development.
Right.
You have people that have bought land with the intention of developing it. You can't say no.
Right.
What you can do is shape it, and shape it for things like quality and benefit to the community and quality of life issues. And that's what we've been focused on. And the overarching premise of that is that we're trying to protect at least 70% of the community in its current form and channel the development into the other 30%. There are a lot of tools that we've used too to help make that happen in a way where the people that don't develop, the people that have the family farm that's been in the family for 7 or 8 generations and want to keep it in the family are able to. They can sell their development rights to the people that are developing, so they actually get a piece of the upside of the development as it's happening. And because they can't develop that land, then they should be paying lower taxes afterward too. And we're hoping to create this circumstance where the development that comes that we need to pave the roads and take care of the infrastructure and all of that, and frankly to provide services for the community, happens in a way that most of the people that are living on that family land will still be here 100 years from now.
Right.
And there's no place in Georgia that has done that, right? It's a really big and different vision. And again, it's not anti-development,
right?
But what it is pro quality of life for the people that live there. And frankly, the people that live in the developments that come along because of what we're doing, and Serenbe being the first example in Chattahoochee Hills, have a great quality of life too, because the preserved land that surrounds them. Their cows still know, their kids still know what cows smell like, right? and can get out in nature, and so many proven benefits of that. And still have that kind of sense of community that you have with the neighborhoods that we code for. We require these kind of dense little walkable mixed-use communities buffered from the outside. So the forest and farm stays like it is, and these new communities also have a good quality of life. Again, easy to say, hard to do, right?
Oh,
But
man.
that's the thing that we're trying to do.
Well, you guys are doing it, Tom. I tell people all the time, I really enjoy coming out to Chat Hills, in particular Serenbe, because it really gives you that sense of place, right? Destination, right? You know you're in Chat Hills when you enter Chat Hills or you enter Serenbe. And I want to commend you and your team and all the leadership and developers, investors, everyone who has really believed in the dream. I think Steve, I'm sure would get on that soapbox as well if we brought him in here. But you're speaking both him and the residents, and I think Chat Hills is a great example of true intentionality, right? And not really wavering any of your preconceived thoughts and notions about what you really want, and making it happen and setting up the ecosystem for it to thrive and happen. And so for anyone who has not visited Chat Hills, you're doing yourself a disservice. And so I really enjoy coming and spending time in the space and ecosystem that has been created. And something you shared, Tom, was a unique fun fact about Chat Hills that I didn't know, 6th largest in regards to land mass. Any other fun facts that are out there that may be good for our listeners? And I want to throw something out there. And I just told you, we just shared it all over social media that Serenbe is now the backdrop, will be the backdrop for the Old magazine in April, which is huge. And I know that Serenbe and Chat Hills has really flourished and had several different examples of success and marketing and what that looks like. But I'd love to position it to the mayor and get some more fun facts about Chat Hills.
Well, we do have amazing, Serenbe is the first example of development happening under our zoning, and it's an amazing example of it.
Phenomenal.
They've got a lot of amazing quality of life things, the playhouse and the plays that they have and those sorts of things. And, it creates a huge positive impact for the city in terms of tax base. It's more than half of our tax base, and they've disturbed less than 0.5% of our land mass, right?
Oh, that's huge.
And you've been there, so when you drive up to it, you can barely see it.
Right.
So it's buffered. It doesn't really have much of an impact on what's happening outside. And yet the quality of life for both the people that live in Serenbe and the people that live outside, I think benefits from the connection, right? There are people that live in Serenbe that do a lot of stuff, good work outside of the community. There are a lot of people from outside that come in, a lot of friendships across that, what might be a divide. The other thing, though, is that there are a lot of other just like amazing things out in the community, amazing people in the community, artists and people that are accidental artists sometimes. We have, for example, the site of the eventing championships, the horse eventing, where they jump over the barrels and all that up at the farm up at Bucarts, which brings in thousands of people to this beautiful farm on the river. And, they enjoy that all the time. We also have hidden things. There's a beautiful little bed and breakfast on Cochrane Mill Road that has, amazing write-ups. And the son of the person that runs that is just getting ready to try to start a microbrewery.
Oh, nice.
Right. And grow their own hops and this kind of agritourism thing that goes on. And he is 8th generation from Chat Hills, right?
Wow.
So, that kind of energy just doesn't exist in a lot of places.
No, man.
I I oftentimes, people come down and they say, "Show me Chat Hills." I'm like, "Okay, you got a few hours?" Because it's huge. You can't just see it in a minute. Dick Anderson and I had lunch one day, and he ended up in my car for about 4.5 hours. And he's like,
I can
"Are we
believe it.
still in Chattahoochee Hills?" I'm like, "Yeah, still in Chattahoochee Hills." We have a guy and his wife, Carter and Laura Williamson, that have made this. They work for the EPA, and they have made this event facility out of old barns and found pieces. And he's helped do mitigation at a bunch of mills, and like just has found access to these amazing things. And they've got this amazing event facility just in the middle of the countryside, right? They have weddings and things like that.
Nice.
You've got Keith Robinson is a gentleman that lives in the community that, writes articles for Veranda magazine and lives in this beautiful early 1800s farmhouse that is so authentic that you'd be shocked to go. It's still only one little kitchen, one little bathroom, because it's been kept so authentic. It's just gorgeous.
Wow.
And there are little pieces like this scattered all through the community. These just amazing things. The history of the community is amazing. And the goal for us is to try to keep as much of that as we can. A lot of those unique little points. And again, these beautiful farms where people are raising cattle for the third or fourth generation on a particular piece of land. We want to keep that all while adding, the places like the Serenbys and hopefully other ones that have different styles and, but are also interesting and full of energy and life and bring tax revenues and,
That's right.
All of those things, with an aim toward both maintaining the quality of life for the people that are there and providing great quality of life for the people that are coming.
Well, I think that speaks to our earlier conversation around that delicate balance, right? Making sure that there's a happy median between the two, and I'm sure there's tons of civic engagement, right? Communication, making sure that the leadership is understanding of what the community is really looking and expecting. And I think you guys have really the model, to be quite honest, for that, because I think you've been able to strike that delicate balance.
It's a difficult thing, right? I mean, like,
It really is.
right now we've got 107 miles of roads, right? I mean, more roads in cities a lot bigger than this, and that obviously have much more tax base than we do. So there are things like that are difficult, right? And we've got a great little fire department, great little police department. We provide great service, and it's hard to keep up with all the needs, right? So that's the other thing that I'm regularly reminding people of. Like, look, it's not just that we have to have development so that we don't get sued or whatever, right?
Right.
It's also that you need to have some of this stuff to provide the tax revenues to make the city work.
You hit it, man.
And it's just what it is, right? So again, shaping it in a way that's positive and beneficial.
That's right.
Is hugely important.
Well, and a perfect segue, right? Speaking to that growth and development in regards to Chat Hills, because I know that you oftentimes wear not only the mayoral hat, but you're also economic development. You do a lot of different activities for the city. So for our listeners who may not be as familiar with the activity happening in Chat Hills, help our listeners understand about some of that activity at Serenby or even within Chat Hills around pad-ready sites or new companies, infrastructures, et cetera. Help our listeners understand what's happening.
By the way, you mentioned something I want to call out. We have an incredible tiny staff, right? And we are incredibly lucky with the quality of some of the people that we have. But like my planning director is also my planner. He's also my permitting guy. He's also the events guy, right? So like he's wearing 4 or 5 hats, and that frankly is the fact with most of our people. City clerk is the finance director, all of that. And so, we don't have an economic development director. We can't afford an economic development director. It's something that suits my background. So, I go out and do that work. The pad ready is not something that is such a big thing for us yet. And frankly, pad ready implies a kind of development that really isn't the style that we're looking for anyway. We're not looking for people to plop something down and then leave the community. We're looking for people to come in and be a part of the community and to be a part of making it a better place, right? So Serenby definitely has opportunities for that sort of thing. We have, they've just opened their first big commercial building there, fully leased. So there's obviously the demand. And, you think about a little town like this, there are no doctor's offices yet in Chat Hills. There are no, some of those kind of like the local services you expect. People have to go to Palmetto or they have to go to Fairburn or whatever.
Shout out to Mayor Bodie and Mayor Hurst, right?
Yeah, exactly. That's right. That's right.
He hold us to that, right?
That's right. And I mean, again, it's all good,
Right.
but it'd be nice to have some more of that in town.
That's right.
And so we've got opportunities for things like that, office and retail and restaurant, commercial, hospitality, currently in Serenbe.
Yes.
But we're also talking to people about other places in Chat Hills where the conditions exist where they can also do that kind of development. And again, that kind of development for us is what creates the money to make the preservation happen. And so, that's a whole long conversation that we could probably save for a different interview. But like there's a whole mechanism there that makes preservation happen, and it requires development to fund it.
Right. Right.
And again, there are places on the Parkway that would be a great fit for that kind of thing.
You hit
right?
it. You hit it.
We're doing some work up in Campbellton, which is the very north part of the city, with City of South Fulton. Another one of these examples of partnership where, we're on one side of an intersection, they're on the other side. And the last thing we want to do is develop something over here that absolutely doesn't fit with what's over here.
You hit it.
So we're working together, hopefully with ARC, and then there's a plug there for ARC.
That's right. Atlanta Regional Commission.
We want that. We want that grant to make that thing happen. But that sort of thing where we're working together with our partners
That's right.
nearby to make sure that we're serving the quality of life needs of everybody around is super important.
That's right. Extremely.
Yeah. Well, I'm a
Oh,
huge
man.
proponent of regionalism.
Yes,
and
you are.
regionalism does not mean that everybody's doing the same thing and
Right.
that people don't get to have their unique character. What it means is that we work together so that your unique character works and mine works and that they don't oppose each other, right? And that's an easy thing to do
Hit it, Tom.
if you get in the room.
Come on, Tom.
Yeah, no worries.
Bring them to it. Hey, we need a collection plate now, Tom. Listen, Tom, I think you hit several key
Yeah,
points.
sorry.
I mean, several. But what I love to do is maybe transition, right, and just elevate the conversation around regionalism and the opportunity to partner more and be good neighbors. And it really speaks to the organization who we're very fond of. I know that you and other mayors in the region are very active and engaged. Nick Byers, I know, champions the organization, and that's the South Fulton Parkway Alliance. For our audience who may not be as familiar with the Parkway Alliance, we tend to tout it a good bit because South Fulton Parkway is an opportunity for our region to really think bold and be ambitious and really create a vision for a great ecosystem for growth and development, right? That we could really define ourselves as a region based on what happens with this canvas, right? And so for our listeners, help them understand Chattahoochee Hill's involvement with the South Fulton Parkway Alliance and its initiatives to really bring true economic prosperity and development to the corridor, to the Georgia Aerotropolis corridor.
And quality of life.
And quality of life.
And I
Thank
know
you.
you get
Oh, you
tired
know
of me
it.
doing that because I do
it's
that
important.
in every
It's
conversation. But
It's
the
important.
reason that we're developing, I think the reason anywhere that you develop should not be just because. It should be because it improves the quality of life for people that are in the area that
That's
you're
right.
developing in, right?
No question.
And
Number one.
that can mean a lot of different things in different places, but that's the key. And so, the South Fulton Parkway Alliance, I've been a member of that board for many years, since before I was mayor.
Wow.
Because they are focused and have become, especially recently, focused on that issue of
Yes.
quality of life and supporting the kind of development that improves the quality of life for the people that are living on the Parkway. And frankly, typically, the kind of development that increases quality of life for people is also higher value for the developer.
That's right.
So it's one of those win-wins. It's just not always the easiest thing because, the bankers of the world aren't necessarily lending for that thing today, right?
Oh, man, you hit
And
it.
I mean, this is an issue
It
with
is.
the way the development happens,
Very
period.
true.
Right?
Very
People
true.
get on a certain thing and they wear it out without
Literally.
necessarily thinking about, other things that you could do that might be better or different and better. And so, we focus a lot on that, on how to make the planning happen in a way that it's not accidental. South Fulton Parkway was built, over the course of 20 years as an economic development road. It was built like 400.
Right.
And a lot like 400. At the beginning, you looked at it and you said, that's the road to nowhere. Why on earth did they build that, right? Now, 400 has had amazing development. And you talk to people that live there, they hate it.
They hate it.
Right?
Yeah.
And like, no more, right? Because you can't get anywhere. Traffic is miserable. It just wasn't planned
Right.
for the scale that it has.
Exactly.
And, we would make the argument, and we talk about this a lot at the South Fulton Parkway Alliance, that if you plan for what you think is going to happen, if you plan for what you want to happen and attract those things that you want to happen and do the infrastructure work up front to make that happen properly, you end up getting both the good development and a much better quality of life.
That's right.
Because you've planned ahead for those things. And look, the other reality is that it's much less expensive to do the infrastructure work in advance. Right? They're getting ready to try to put MARTA another few miles up 400 and, billions of dollars because they have to tear down Class A office buildings to do it, right? It's just not the smartest way to do those things. No, and with all due respect, I think it was just the pattern that people were in at the time.
You hit it.
And it's like anything, right? If you don't learn from the things that are out there to learn from, then shame on you. And that's a message that I'm trying to put out there all the time. And I'm really pleased that it's had such great there are a lot of people that are thinking that way. It's tough when you're the mayor of a little city. There's stuff going on every day.
Right.
People complaining about a pothole, whatever, and that's important stuff. And you need to make sure that stuff gets taken care of.
Of course. People
don't think about what their grandchildren are going to be living in. They don't, and it's because everybody's focused on their day to day. But the responsibility of somebody that's in a position to do something about what's going to happen 100 years from now is to be thinking about 100 years from now.
That's right.
I believe that strongly. And I put that forward a lot in the conversations that we're having. And again, it's amazing how everybody rises to that, right? When you start thinking that way, it's like, we should be thinking that way. And suddenly you're having a conversation about how do you make these outcomes happen that you really want to have. Like, I want my grandchildren to be living in a place where countryside is still there and where there are 7th, 10th generation farmers that they know, right? And where they can walk to a movie theater and whatever, right?
Exactly.
Like all of those things, we're working to make that happen.
And you're doing it.
And no, but there are other people too. I brag on Jack from College Park all the time.
Oh yeah.
Right. Because they had a huge opportunity there to shape the way that a part of their town was going to be.
Very true.
Across from GICC, the airport city, right? We've been talking about that a lot. And they had people coming and they wanted to do something industrial there. They wanted to do a warehouse, whatever. And Jack's still do. And Jack said no. He said, no, we're looking for something higher quality. And here's a reality, right? Things are either getting better or they're getting worse.
Right.
And nobody wants to site something nice next to a garbage dump, right? Or a warehouse. And there are places for those things. We need those things in the community, right?
Absolutely.
But you need to be thoughtful about where and what. And you've got areas of College Park that are ripe for good community-driven redevelopment. And Airport City, with its mixed use and retail and office and housing and all of that, will take a chunk of College Park and make it much better than it is now.
You hit it.
Right?
You hit it.
Where the warehouse wouldn't do that.
Not at all.
And again, I know that there are people that feel like I'm anti-warehouse. I'm anti-warehouse in certain places. Right?
You hit it.
You've got Oakley Industrial, which was designed to be the kind of place where that stuff lives.
Exactly.
And it's right there by the interstate, and they're upgrading the intersections to make it work. That makes perfect sense. Next to my house, not so much sense, right? And thinking about things that way, and thinking too about what the value of things might be. Mixed use, for example, is worth 50 to 100 times as much per acre as warehouse. There's a continuum there, right?
It is.
Like hospitals, office, whatever up here, mixed use, and then, garbage dumps, for example, down here. But they give good tipping fees. Yeah, I know, but nobody ever wants to live next to one. It does not help your city, right?
You hit it.
And so, it's that kind of thought process going through and just kind of holistically thinking about what actually gets you the outcomes that you want.
Right. And
what steps are you taking to make those happen. And again, with all due respect to somebody who's been sitting on a piece of land for a while and wants to sell it, the kind of things that we're talking about raise the value of that land.
Absolutely.
Maybe not today. You may have to wait a couple years longer.
Right.
But, you're not a voter in my town. And it's not your quality of life. You live somewhere else, right? I'm worried about the quality of life of the people that live in my town.
That's right.
And my neighbors' towns, right? And I think there's a building energy on the South Side around that issue.
Yes,
right?
it is.
So,
no, Tom, you articulated very well. To be quite honest, several key components of not only strategic thinking around economic development for our region, but also thinking bold and ambitiously, right? And, to all of our viewers and listeners, I think Tom hit a very good point, is that our region, we understand that we're next to the world's largest logistics hub here, okay? So no question, just through the nature of the gravity of the airport, we will attract the warehouse and logistics of the world, but we want to be intentional about it, right? We want to make sure that they are located in a way that accommodates their growth and their advancement to attract more companies and jobs and opportunities, but not in a way that discombobulates our potential growth as a region 50 to 100 years from now, right? Because you put a big box next to a community, now you've got a special purpose building that ultimately will be a special purpose building for its entirety.
That's right.
And who's going to bulldoze that thing and turn it into something else?
That's
I
right.
mean, and then go through the phase 1 and phase 2s of the world. So, we're talking because Tom, I'm sure we could spend a lot of time on this, but I just wanted to make sure I revisited that point of your conversation because it's very, I think, timely. And especially coming from a regional thinker like yourself who, no question, works with Mayor Vince Williams, Mayor Bill Edwards, Mayor Bodie, Mayor Hurst, all of the partners that exist within the ecosystem of our southernmost corridor. And so I just want to thank you for that, Tom, for that articulation for our viewers and our listeners, but more importantly, for them to understand better about who you are and what's happening in Chat Hills, right? So with that being said, Tom, I know we filled them up today with a lot of good information, and I hope our listeners really took notes and took heed to everything that you mentioned today. Is there anything that we didn't cover today, Tom, that you wanted to make sure we covered that our listeners and our viewers heard from you?
I mean, no. There is an arc of this. To your point, we could spend hours and hours.
We could,
talking
man,
about
and we
these
do.
things.
Be quite honest,
and we do exactly. I'll make the case always for planning.
right?
And there are amazing planners that we've worked with. That the Kimley Horns and Jacobs and Perkins Wills of the world.
Oh yeah, they're all spending time down here with us.
Are all coming down to think about what that better vision looks like. And to your point, right? The airport has this need for the kind of high dollar close-in logistics. But there are a lot of decisions that we make around how we develop and redevelop things that have impact way into the future, right?
get it.
And there was some talk at one point about how they should take Fulton Industrial and turn it all into a distribution warehouse district, right? And fine, but a lot of those buildings aren't tall enough for that, right?
No.
So they'd need to be torn down. But they're perfect for high-tech manufacturing. And high-tech manufacturing creates a lot more and a lot better paying jobs. So if we were going to focus on something, why wouldn't we focus on that, right? And I mean, for me, it's a lot of this is that kind of conversation.
It really is.
I get it. Inertia is taking in this direction, but is inertia really taking us in the direction we want to go?
You hit it.
Or if we were thoughtful about it and articulated a different message, would we attract a different kind of person in to do the thing that is actually better service to our community?
That's right.
And for me,
Highest
it's
and best.
always about that, right?
That's right.
It's always about putting the vision out there and aiming high, to your point, knowing you'll never get 100% of what you want. But if you aim really high and you get 90% of it, you've ended up with an amazing result, right? If you aim low, I promise you that's all you're going to get.
And you will get it.
And that conceptually should be driving all of our conversations
That's right.
in our towns down here.
You hit
Again,
it.
totally recognizing that we all have our own individual needs, right?
Right.
But if we raise the tide, it really can lift all the boats, right?
That's right.
And there's so much more.
Listen, guys, you guys have literally got a small glimpse into the view of the mind of the great Mayor Tom Reed of Chat Hills. Tom, I know that our listeners are going to want to find you, want to find Chat Hills. How can they find you? Either email, phone number, website. Help our listeners find you.
It's not about me. Thank you.
Okay.
Chattahoochee Hills, you will find down South Fulton Parkway. You drive down South Fulton Parkway until the fields start, right? Past that last traffic light, and that's all Chattahoochee Hills. And pretty much any direction you go, you'll find amazing things. The busiest and most beautiful natural park at least in the South Side.
In the Aerotropolis.
So many things to exactly. No, I mean, people are welcome to reach out to me, tom.reed at chathillsga.us. And I'm always happy to talk to people about, the good message. And frankly, anything else, people want to yell at me about something, that's good too. That's where you find me. But this is not This is a community vision. This is a group vision.
That's right.
And to your point earlier, there are a lot of people in this field. They're in this field because they like to hear their name. Mm-hmm. That's not me. I like to get things done, and we're getting some cool stuff done, or at least lining up to get some cool stuff done. So
That's right.
I'm hopeful about that.
Well, you're doing it, Tom, and we're excited to have you. And I want to thank you not only for participating today in the podcast, but also for stepping up. I remember when the first conversations were being had about Chat Hills and the Fairburns and the Union Cities becoming members of the Aerotropolis, you were championing that. Mm-hmm. And so I just want to thank you for being the visionary and the leader you are, and for continuing to be an ambassador for our region. And so I just want to thank you, Tom. Seriously.
And thank you for letting us join, right? I mean, no, because, I mean, look, that was not the easiest thing for a while, right?
It wasn't.
Because why are they in the Aerotropolis? Now, I hear that from my own citizens. Why on earth are we in the Aerotropolis? And, you know, we've talked about this too, right? These things impact us whether or not we're at the table.
That's right.
So you better be at the table for things that are going to impact you, right? And so I'm very grateful that you have brought us into this conversation.
Thank you, Tom. No, thank you, my
and for
friend.
your leadership. Yeah.
Extremely grateful. Well, we're bouncing off of each other for sure, and I'm learning a lot. Well, listen, guys, you heard from himself directly, the mayor of Chattahoochee Hills, Mr. Tom Reed, part of our mayoral series, and I hope that you enjoyed our all of the great information that you heard today in our podcast. If you haven't, please follow us on LinkedIn, Facebook, Twitter. You can find us at AEROATL.org. And again, we want to thank our sponsors at Wellstar for sponsoring this podcast and being dedicated members and investors in our great vision to continue to build regional economic competitiveness. Again, my name is Shannon James, your president and CEO of the Aerotropolis Atlanta Alliance, where we want to help you land here and take off.